At Thanksgiving dinner, my uncle scoffed and said, "You're just the family disappointment. Sit down and try not to embarrass us." My sister chimed in, "Just be grateful we let you come." I nodded, like I didn't matter. I didn't speak, just excused myself to the bathroom and quietly took my luggage from the closet. While they were arguing over dessert, I slipped out the front door and took something with me that they wouldn't notice was missing until it was too late. I, 32M, had always been the black sheep, but this Thanksgiving would be their last chance to treat me like garbage. The familiar knot in my stomach tightened as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Same house, same faded brick, same feeling of dread washing over me like a cold wave. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the window as my perfect sister's perfect family gathered around the dining table, their laughter echoing through the glass. I'd driven 8 hours to be here. 8 hours of telling myself this time would be different, that maybe they'd finally see me as more than their failure. The successful software engineer who'd built 3 startups from scratch, who owned a house in Silicon Valley, who'd finally gotten his life together after years of struggle. But none of that mattered to them. I was still the kid who'd dropped out of college twice, the one who disappointed them at every turn. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom asking where I was. I grabbed my overnight bag and walked to the front door, already regretting my decision to come. The warmth hit me as I stepped inside, along with the familiar smell of turkey and my mother's perfume. Everyone was already seated around the extended dining table. My sister looked up from her plate with that practiced smile she'd perfected over the years, the one that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. Dad gave me a brief nod from the head of the table. Mom bustled over with forced enthusiasm, asking about my drive, while Uncle Richard barely glanced up from cutting his turkey. He'd always been the family's self-appointed judge, the one who measured everyone's worth in dollars and social status. I took the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one that felt more like a consolation prize than a seat among family. The conversation continued around me as if I were invisible. Discussions about my sister's promotion, her husband's new car, their kids' achievements in school. I picked at my food and listened, waiting for the inevitable moment when the spotlight would turn to me. It didn't take long. Uncle Richard set down his fork and looked directly at me with that condescending expression I knew so well. He made some comment about my latest job, asking if I was still playing with computers and when I was going to get a real career. The table went quiet, and I felt every pair of eyes on me. I started to explain about my consulting work, about the companies I'd helped, about the 6-figure contracts I'd been landing. But Uncle Richard waved his hand dismissively and said those words that would replay in my mind for hours afterward. He called me the family disappointment, told me to sit down and try not to embarrass them. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot, my hands trembling slightly as I set down my water glass. But before I could respond, my sister's voice cut through the silence. She chimed in with her own observation, telling me to just be grateful they let me come. The rest of the table remained silent. No one defended me. No one told them they'd gone too far. Dad focused intently on his mashed potatoes, and Mom suddenly found something fascinating about the pattern on her napkin. Even my brother-in-law, who'd always been decent to me, studied his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. I nodded, like their words didn't matter, like I didn't matter. Because in that moment, I realized something crucial. I truly didn't matter to them. I was the obligatory family member they tolerated out of duty, not love. I excused myself quietly, saying I needed to use the bathroom. My legs felt unsteady as I walked down the familiar hallway, past the family photos that chronicled everyone's achievements except mine. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, and I stared at my reflection in the mirror my mother had hung there 20 years ago. That's when I made the decision. I slipped out of the bathroom and moved quietly to the front closet where I'd left my overnight bag. My hands moved with surprising steadiness as I gathered my things, listening to the muffled voices from the dining room. They'd moved on to discussing dessert options, their earlier cruelty already forgotten. But I hadn't forgotten, and I wouldn't forget. As I lifted my bag, my eyes fell on something I'd noticed earlier but hadn't really processed. Dad's leather briefcase sat on the closet floor, partially hidden behind winter coats. He always brought work with him, even on holidays. Always claimed he was too busy for family time, but somehow found hours to review contracts and financial documents. My heart pounded as I knelt beside the briefcase. It wasn't locked. Dad had always been careless about security, too trusting, too comfortable in his assumption that family meant safety. Inside, I found exactly what I'd expected: contracts, financial statements, and something that made my breath catch in my throat. Bank statements. Not just personal accounts, but business accounts. And correspondence with his business partner about their latest real estate development deal. The one they'd been keeping quiet about. The one that involved rezoning applications and city council meetings. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything, my hands moving quickly but methodically. Page after page of documents that painted a very clear picture of some questionable business practices. Nothing illegal, exactly, but certainly ethically gray. The kind of thing that would raise eyebrows if it became public knowledge. The voices from the dining room grew louder as someone started an argument about which pie to serve first. Perfect timing. I finished photographing the documents and carefully returned everything to its original position. The briefcase looked undisturbed, just another piece of Dad's work life that the rest of us weren't supposed to care about. I stood up, shouldered my bag, and walked quietly toward the front door. No one noticed me leave. They were too busy arguing about dessert, too wrapped up in their own perfect little world to care that the family disappointment had vanished. My car started on the first try, and I backed out of the driveway without turning on my headlights. Only when I reached the end of the street did I flip them on, illuminating the dark road ahead. Behind me, the house glowed warm and inviting, full of people who'd made it clear I didn't belong. I drove for 2 hours before stopping at a diner off the interstate. My phone had been buzzing intermittently, probably Mom wondering where I'd gone, but I ignored it. I ordered coffee and a piece of pie, better than anything they were serving back at the house, and pulled out my laptop. The photographs uploaded quickly to my secure cloud storage. I spent an hour organizing them, creating a clear timeline of Dad's business dealings. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Strategic property purchases just before zoning changes, development permits approved with unusual speed, city contracts awarded to his company despite higher bids from competitors. I researched the local newspaper's investigative team, found their secure tip line, and crafted an anonymous message. I didn't want to destroy my father. Despite everything, he was still family. But I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, that treating people like garbage comes with a price. The message was simple. A concerned citizen had come across documents suggesting possible conflicts of interest in recent city development projects. I attached selected photographs, enough to raise questions, but not enough to immediately implicate anyone specifically. Let them do their own investigation. Let them draw their own conclusions. I hit send at 11:47 p.m. My phone showed 6 missed calls and 12 text messages. I finally checked them. Mom asking where I'd gone, then worried messages, then angry ones demanding I call back immediately. My sister had sent 2 texts, the first asking if I was okay, the second calling me dramatic and selfish for leaving during dinner. I turned off my phone and drove home. Update 1. 3 weeks later, the story broke. I was having my morning coffee when I saw the headline on the local news website: City Development Deals Under Investigation Following Anonymous Tip. The article was thorough but careful, raising questions about the timing of certain zoning decisions and property acquisitions without making direct accusations. Dad's company was mentioned by name, along with 2 others that had received unusually favorable treatment from the city. The reporter had done excellent work, connecting dots that went far beyond what I'd provided. My photographs had simply been the starting point for a much larger investigation. My phone started ringing at 8 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. Then again at 8:15. By 9 a.m., I had 17 missed calls from various family members. I finally listened to the messages. Dad's voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. He wanted to know if I'd seen the news, if I had any idea who might have done this to him. Mom sounded worried, asking me to call back because Dad was beside himself with stress. My sister's message was more direct. She accused me of having something to do with the investigation because the timing was too convenient. I deleted all the messages without responding. The investigation continued for 6 more weeks. During that time, I received updates from family members I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to know what I knew, all assuming I had inside information because of my computer skills. I told everyone the same thing. I'd seen the news like everyone else, and I hoped everything worked out fine. Dad's business partner was the first to crack under pressure. He admitted to the city council that they'd received advance information about zoning changes from a council member who was also a client of Dad's accounting firm. Nothing provably illegal, but ethically questionable enough to kill several pending contracts. The business survived, but barely. Dad had to dissolve the partnership and restructure everything. They lost the 3 biggest contracts they'd been counting on for the next year. Uncle Richard, who'd been a silent investor in several of Dad's projects, lost a significant amount of money. I felt a cold satisfaction reading about their troubles, but it was tempered by something I hadn't expected: guilt. This was my family, after all, however dysfunctional we might be. Update 2. The call I'd been dreading came on a Tuesday evening in January. Mom's voice was quiet, tired in a way I'd never heard before. She told me Dad had figured it out. Not the details, but the general truth, that someone in the family had leaked those documents. The timing was too perfect, she said, and Dad remembered seeing his briefcase moved slightly after Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't accuse me directly, but her tone said everything. She wanted me to come home, to talk to Dad, to help fix whatever was broken in our family. I told her I'd think about it, and hung up. I didn't go home, but I did something else. I sent an anonymous cashier's check for $50,000 to Dad's business account with a note, from someone who believes in second chances. I could afford it. My consulting business had exploded over the past year, partly due to the confidence boost of finally standing up for myself, even if no one knew I'd done it. The money wouldn't solve all their problems, but it would help. And maybe, someday, it would balance the scales between what they'd done to me and what I'd done to them. Update 3. This past Thanksgiving, I didn't go home. Instead, I volunteered at a local shelter, serving dinner to people who actually appreciated having someone care about them. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. No judgment, no disappointment, no reminders of how I'd failed to meet everyone's expectations. My phone stayed off all day. Later that evening, I found a voicemail from my sister. Her voice was different, softer, less certain than usual. She said they'd all been thinking about me during dinner, wondering how I was doing. She admitted, almost reluctantly, that they might have been too hard on me over the years. Not an apology exactly, but closer than anything I'd ever gotten from her before. She also mentioned that Dad's business was slowly recovering. They'd won 2 small contracts recently, and while things weren't back to normal, they were managing. She didn't know about the anonymous check, of course, but I heard relief in her voice when she talked about Dad's improved mood. The message ended with an invitation to Christmas dinner. She said they'd understand if I didn't want to come, but they hoped I would consider it. I saved the message and thought about it for 3 days. In the end, I decided to go. Not because I'd forgiven them completely, and certainly not because I'd forgotten what they'd said that night, but because I'd learned something important about myself over the past year. I didn't need their approval to know my own worth. I'd also learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, leaves you empty if that's all you have. The real victory wasn't in bringing them down. It was in building myself up despite their attempts to diminish me. Christmas dinner was awkward but civil. No one mentioned the investigation or the missing documents. Uncle Richard was notably absent, apparently still bitter about his financial losses. Dad was quieter than usual, but he shook my hand when I arrived and asked genuine questions about my work. My sister made an effort to include me in conversations, though her attempts felt forced and uncomfortable. Her husband was actually more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, probably relieved that the family drama had shifted away from being about him for once. As I was leaving that evening, Dad walked me to my car. He stood there for a moment, looking older than I remembered, and told me he was proud of how I'd handled my business challenges over the years. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask him to, but something in his tone suggested he understood more than he was saying. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't experienced with my family in decades: peace. Not forgiveness exactly, and certainly not forgetting, but a kind of quiet resolution that felt more satisfying than any revenge could have been. They'd called me the family disappointment, told me I didn't belong at their table. But I'd shown them, and more importantly, I'd shown myself, that sometimes the biggest disappointment is how people choose to treat the ones they claim to love. And sometimes, the best response isn't to sink to their level. Sometimes it's to rise above it, even if they never realize how high you've climbed. The documents are still in my secure storage, a reminder of that night and the choice I made. I'll probably never delete them, but I'll never use them again either. They're just proof that even family disappointments can have the last word, even if no one else knows we've spoken.